Today I was messing around in my vault trying to see what would pair very well with the Strand subclass for the Warlock Brood Weaver, and to my surprise I did pull out a old trace rifle of mine that I absolutely love that came out back in Season of Arrivals. I did do a video on it in the past, and today I do have a brand new build for you guys, and what I'm going to call the build is Ruinous Trance. Now we are taking advantage of the Strand subclass Brood Weaver. But before we jump into all of that, I want to thank you all for coming back and watching. I really appreciate all the love that I have received recently, and I hope you guys stick around for more. Now, with this build, it really plays on survivability and utility for the most part. It does have some cool features to it, and one thing that I did learn with the Strand subclass is you can create the suspension with any weapon final blow, which I did not know that before. I thought you had to have a Strand weapon, so I don't believe I made any videos stating otherwise, but if I did in the past, I apologize for that. I did find out, like I said, that you can create that suspension with any weapon final blow. It doesn't matter the element or anything like that, and I purely found that out just by playing. So I decided to use Ruinous Effigy just because a lot of players have been using Wave Splitter, and I wanted to do something different. Now, one thing you're absolutely going to need to make this build work is the Shackle Grenade. Basically, we're going to eat our grenade and we're going to proc Weavers Trance. Now, Weavers Trance lasts 25 seconds, which is an extremely long time. And it basically states holding your grenade will consume it and you'll proc Weavers Trance. And final blows while Weavers Trance is active creates a suspending detonation. And like I said, you could do this with anything, any weapon, any element, any ability, melee, super, anything like that, and you will proc Weavers Trance. And you will get that suspending detonation around all of your targets. Now with this build, you're definitely going to be creating a ton of Orbs of Power, so that's why we're going to use Thread of Warding as one of our fragments. It basically states once you pick up an Orb of Power, you do grant yourself Woven Mail, and that basically increases your survivability. So it's a good fragment to actually use. I'm also using Thread of Ascent, which basically once I eat one of my grenades or I use a grenade, it reloads all my current weapons and it gives me a bonus to handling and stuff like that. It also gives me a +10 for mobility, which technically isn't really necessary, but it's a nice bump to have nonetheless. And I am also using Thread of Generation. Now this gives me grenade energy as I deal damage, and you'll be getting your grenades back faster than Weaver's Trance actually runs out. So you'll get a grenade sometimes within the next 10 seconds or so, depending on what's going on in the play area. But I find myself sometimes eating an additional grenade at like 18 seconds, and you don't want to do that. It does take some time to get used to playing with, because you think you're out of Weaver's Trance and you've already ran out, but you really haven't, and you're already using another grenade. So that just shows you how strong and how powerful this build really is when it comes to your actual grenades and your suspension. And for my final fragment, we are using Thread of Continuity, which suspend, unravel, and sever effects applied to targets have increased duration. It also gives you a +10 in strength, so you can get that arcane needle back as quickly as possible. Now, those are the basic fragments that you can use. You can straight out one for the other, like you don't necessarily need a Thread of Ascent. If you find yourself using a different fragment for that selection, that's okay, but you absolutely need the Thread of Generation as a must-have. It's very important. And you also need Thread of Continuity just because you want those suspension effects to last longer. And then Thread of Warding is not necessarily necessary, but it is a nice addition to have to take reduced damage when you're near targets, especially since you are creating so many Orbs of Power with this build. Now this brings us to the weapons. Now obviously in the background gameplay you can see that I am using Ruinous Effigy. I'm also using the brand new Sidearm Buzzard, which isn't really brand new. It is just a reissue this season, and it does come with a new perk, Kinetic Tremors. I did release a video on that earlier, and I did not include any PvE gameplay because I didn't want my build to be out there yet. I really wanted to save it for my build that I'm actually releasing today. And the main thing that you really need to take note of is Ruinous Effigy is the main go-to weapon here, and it basically has two exotic perks, and the first one is Transmutation, which basically states final blows with this weapon collapse victims into void transmutation spheres. And you also get Evolution, which states transmutation spheres you create can be picked up and wielded as weapons by you or your allies. A light attack, which the light attack actually allows me to spread poison because I am using the Necrotic Grips exotic gauntlets for the Warlock. So if I do a light attack with the transmutation spear, it will spread the poison. Now you also have the heavy attack, which actually suppresses your enemies. So that's very useful for any type of champions or any other enemies that are coming towards you. In most cases they will die, but I will say the heavy attack does do about 62,377 damage on slam for those big bosses. Now another thing you can do is actually block with it, and it will drain your enemy's power, but you have to be careful because once it reaches 0 it can actually kill you, so you don't want to do that. It will start to drain your health as well. So usually I pick up the spear, run to enemies, and I actually just slam it, and that will create the suspension detonation, and it will give me the void blast damage. Now you also have volatile rounds this season because of the artifact, so if you have that unlocked and you decide to use it, that's an additional anti-barrier thing that you can do, and it will pierce those anti-barrier champions. So it is all around a very effective build. Also too, with the suspension and the Strand subclass, that does counter unstoppable champions. So if you actually slam or kill an enemy near a unstoppable champion, you will suspend it, and it will create that disruption for that champion, and they will be immobilized. So it is a fantastic build. It is fun to play with. I absolutely had a blast playing with it earlier, and I recommend all of you try it as well. Now the gameplay loop I have in the background gameplay, you're pretty much just going to eat a grenade before you start your first encounter, and then from there you will get weapon kills, and as you get a kill, 1 kill, 2 kills, how many ever kills you get, it will create multiple suspension detonations upon those targets. And if you are using Ruinous Effigy or the sidearm or a melee, whatever you may be using, you will create that suspension detonation. Now once you get the transmutation spear, if you slam it, you will also create another suspension detonation on final blows. But you can also do the light attack and get the Necrotic Grips to have that going. You'll actually spread that poison damage, and keep in mind we do have the arcane needle, which that also spreads that poison damage as well. Now as far as the mods go for this build, for your character, it really just depends on you. Now I was pretty much using a lot of firepower mods and using ashes to assets, because the grenades, when you do use the suspension, it does count as a grenade kill because you ate a grenade, and that gives you more super energy. Also too, we are heavily speccing into Orbs of Power, so I suggest definitely running Void Siphon mods. That way you can have a ton of Orbs of Power, and you will actually get your grenade back a lot faster. Now for this build, you really don't have to spec a whole lot into mods or anything like that to make anything work, but I do have a mod list right here, and those 6 are the main ones that you're going to need. And I know that 6 sounds like a lot, but some of them you can kind of get away with and you don't really have to use. The beauty about this build is it actually synergizes well with Ruinous Effigy and the actual fragments and aspects of the Strand subclass, so you're able to get best of both worlds. You have survivability, you have power, and you have immobilization, and that is one of the best things about this build. If you watch my Toxic Coyote build, it pretty much synergized around the same thing, except from there we were using Osteostriga and we were just dive bombing a lot of our enemies and immobilizing them. This is the same thing, it's just a little bit more creative, as we are using a weapon from season 11, and we are using something that a lot of people don't really think about using too often. And that's the best thing about Destiny. We can actually go back and revisit some old exotics and see what works and what doesn't, and I feel like this weapon absolutely works with this subclass, and the ability to immobilize your enemies and do all the suspension and block, slam, all of the stuff that you can do at Ruinous Effigy. It is a phenomenal build. Now don't get me wrong, I like Wave Splitter, but everybody uses Wave Splitter, so I wanted to do something a little different. Now this build is strictly for PvE, so don't go into PvP hoping that you'll be able to do a lot with it. I mean, maybe if you're really good with trace rifles, you'll be able to slay out with it, but for me personally, I would stick with PvE. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this build. Does it suck, or is it absolutely fun to play with? And that's one of the key things that I like about this build personally. It's fun to play with. I am currently working on another Titan build right now, and I will have that out later this week, as well as a couple of other videos for weapon reviews. I know we have Iron Banner coming back this week, so I will have a couple of videos in regards to that as well. In the meantime, I hope you guys are grinding out for Buzzer just because it has returned this week and it is in rotation. Get it while you can. And also, I hope you guys enjoy this video and this build. If you do like this video or this content, don't forget to like this video or like my channel and subscribe to my channel. I greatly appreciate it, and it is a free way to support me. Thank you all so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. I will see you in the next video.